in 1931, George Strait struck the first oil well in Conroe, and it's called the Conroe Field. In the mid-40s, late 30s, mid-40s, that was the third largest field in Conroe. I'm sorry, in the country. The camp was built in the mid-30s, 34, 35. Most of the houses were, in fact, probably all of them were free. I think all the utilities except electricity was free. Many of the outside perimeter area of the camp, there was restaurants, a restaurant at least, a church, barber shop, pool hall, also a doodlebug that came to what was called Butlersburg Crossing. The doodlebug was a small train that carried people from Cleveland to Dobbin and shopped in Conroe and Cleveland. Very handy. I was born there in 37, which makes me the oldest person here.
Absolutely.
John I. Butler was a guy named, John I. was a garbage man that had a team of mules on a wagon and would collect garbage once a week. If you were nice to him and friendly, he'd pick you up and let you ride on the wagon. Sometimes that got kind of unhandy because the mules were pretty frisky. One of the things that I thought was really neat about the camp, hobos, which were probably homeless people, would come from the Doodlebug and beg for food, and people were very generous with them and give them whatever they wanted. And it was a very friendly, open door atmosphere. I remember going over to the people's houses that lived around us to eat dinner with them, and never was I invited. I just walk in and sit down and start eating. It was a very, very fun time to grow up, and the camp was there for about 11 years, and it was abandoned, I think, in 44, right before the war ended. And main reason for abandoning the camp was the Columbia Carbon Plant. Pam and other kids like myself would be playing outside, and you'd come in just with a smell all over you, black as ace of spades. And the ladies would hang their clothes out, and there'd be smell all over the clothes. So it was a big problem, and we had to find out, or they had to figure out a way to get people out of that situation. So they bought the land on Porter Road, and that's when the change came and the new camp was established.
So that area now was what we call the Old Humble Camp.
Exactly.
And it is now Jefferson Chemical,
Right.
where that camp was. And I only lived there for a few years because I'm a lot younger than he is. So anyway, I was very young, but I did get dirty. But I have a few memories of that area. And what we did was, most of the time, was listen to the radio, because that's all we could do other than play outside. And our parents, our mothers, quilted. And that was my first memory of kind of the neighborhood, is that during the week they would go into a bedroom and release this quilting frame, and all the women would sit around and quilt. And they made sections with their names on them. And then they would give a quilt to one person, and then they'd make another quilt and give it to another person. And so Annie Greer's name is on there, along with my mother's name. And that quilt, and it's also dated, it's 1940. Would you mind handing it to me? I want to show you it's very fragile. And Freddie has one of these too. Fred has one of these too. So you can see how sweet it is. Mm-hmm. You see the names? There's 1940. There's Miss Carter, Miss Noakes, Miss Price,
Jane Brumley,
Miss Brumley,
Hardcastle,
Carol,
Crier.
Miss Price was one of the originating founders of Mims Church, Mims Baptist Church, and it started right there in the camp. She got a group together.
My grandmother was a founder of the church there in the Humble Camp.
Nice.
And it was started, they said the first meeting was in our house. But I know Miss Price was very
involved.
Yeah.
So this is a great memory of that time, and this is actually before I was born. But they made other ones.
One of the things I remember about the new camp is the rec hall. We call it recreation hall. And there were many activities, parties. You could use the hall for any occasion, birthdays or anniversaries. But another thing we'd do is go in the park. Every July the 4th, all these men would get together and dig a hole in the ground and build a big fire and cook barbecue and all night long. And I'm sure they had a few other things, but the kids and the families would come on the 4th and play and eat barbecue and have a party all day long. It's really neat, very friendly.
See, I didn't move into the camp until about 51. And when I was there,
I was almost married then.
when I was there, they had picnics. The company sponsored picnics almost monthly, especially during the summer. And then occasionally they would have them at the rec hall where we would go in, and it was usually potluck. But,
A lot of potluck.
yeah.
And birthday parties and wedding receptions and club meetings, and it was just a place where everybody gathered. It's really a nice.
City folks like Anne Marie called us the oil field trash, but I don't think we were really trash.
Well,
I always
was
said we
jealous.
didn't know we were trash.
Anne Marie was jealous because she didn't have friends living around her that you could go out and play with all the time.
Well, I considered us, now we were a modern suburb because we had curb and gutter. We had sidewalks all the way around, and you could skate for hours, and paved roads. I mean, it was a great place.
And the bus came in to pick everybody up, buses probably, but one of the main buses was a guy named Sam Dahl who drove the bus called Little Lulu.
I remember Little
And we would
Lulu.
take turns. Each one was called flaggers. And of course, you'd be standing at the front of the door as we came to the railroad track, get out and run across
Right,
the
run
flag.
across and wave them
I don't know
off.
what the purpose was, but if it was a train, I'm sure it'd hit us.
I remember that.
One of the funniest things I think I remember, my mother never drove until she was probably 45. And she told my dad, she said, I need to learn how to drive. I need my license and get more independent on this. So he laid the keys on the table and said, get with it. She goes out to the garage, and there's a side door that goes into the garage, and she opened that and went in, got in the car and cranked it up, backed out, forgot the big door was still closed, knocked the door clean off the hinges.
Oh, wow.
So, anyway, she did get her license.
Well, we were talking about in our houses, the houses were sort of, I guess, almost paired because we shared a garage. There were 2 stalls, but then across the back was a washroom, and it was there was a washing machine back there. And I guess everybody, the family shared the washing, and then we all had clotheslines. And I think all the clotheslines were made with Humble oilfield camp pipe.
You told me you still hung your clothes out.
Yeah, I still have the pipe. When we left the camp, Daddy saved the pipes.
Jimmy won't buy you a dryer.
Oh,
No.
wow.
I gotta watch him.
Well, we did a configuration of what we thought that what the camp looked like, and I don't have a visual for you to show you, but we have some drawings in a book in this area, and tried to put names in there for people that lived in this area. There were there were somewhere around 50 houses, but they were all similar, except Debbie's, but hers came later. But Exxon bought, or at the time Humble Oil, bought kit houses from like Sears, which sold them out of their catalog. And they could quickly then put a community together to house these oil field workers sort of at the last minute, which is why the camp came to be, was just about housing. And everybody had the same house, so basically something like this straight gray house, but they were a little bit smaller, and the 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. How we all lived with 1 bath, I have no idea, but we did.
Pam, you may remember, but we called the silk stocking row.
That's right.
The superintendent and assistant superintendent and one of the other officials, I guess you'd say, lived on what was called the silk stocking row, and he had 2 bathrooms. Those houses had 2 bathrooms.
No, I didn't know that.
You need to complain.
I know. I will next time.
I don't know how we wound up. We did not live in a kid house. we had a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. And my sister, who is just a little bit older than me, we called it the modern house because in our kitchen, from the wall, they would fold down a dining room table and chairs that would just fold down from the wall. We had a fold down ironing board. I mean, we thought we were styling. And in the living room, it had cases around the ceiling, and the lights were hidden behind those cases. Barbara says now they're called Cinderella lights. I've never heard that term. But we considered that we lived in the modern house.
Well, there's a
And
lot
you
of
probably
funny
did.
stories, a lot of stories we probably don't want to tell. But one of the stories I can tell is Mary Ann, who's Pam's sister, had a crush on a friend of mine named Gordon Grogan. Gordon happened to be visiting one day, and we were sitting on the front porch talking. All of a sudden, around the corner comes Mary Ann, driving the car, probably 13, 14 years of age. And she was waving at Gordon. All of a sudden, there's a neighbor's car sitting there that she just sideswiped, kept on going, never stopped.
She got in big trouble.
Oh, I remember I got in big trouble. They would get off work. The men would get off work about, I think, 3:30, something like that, in the afternoon. And we would always ride our bike up there. And my dad had an old pickup truck, and he was going down to our house. And I reached up and on my bicycle and grabbed the handle and started talking to him. He stopped the truck and got out and paddled me. I was like,
There were some, weren't there some stories about the water tower?
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell those, Fred? That you were
Well,
involved in that?
one includes your sister. You go ahead and tell it.
No, you tell it. I wasn't there.
There was a guy named, well, there was two guys actually, Lee Allworth and Bill Frazier and myself. We were a couple of years older than Mary Ann, and we kind of had a crush on her a little bit. So we told Mary Ann we were going to go up on the water tower. It's probably 150 feet tall, pretty tall for little kids to be climbing. And we climbed it, and Mary Ann followed us up. Got up there, and one of us said, Mary Ann, now the only way you're going to get down is you got to kiss us. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. We said, Mary Ann, we're going to throw you off if you don't kiss us. Well, she finally kissed us, and then she went down quick.
Well, we were talking about celebrating holidays there also, and Halloween. You trick or treated all. I mean, your parents just turned you loose, and you hit every house in there, and it was nothing but homemade treats. But we knew who made homemade popcorn balls, and we knew where the good stuff was.
Did y'all ever go to the Frazier's house on Friday night?
I don't remember.
A man named Frazier was also the owner of the Lax Auto Store, and he had the first TV in the old camp. Well, one of the most popular shows on the TV then was the Friday Night Wrestling, and half the people in the camp would go to their house. We were standing outside looking in the windows, looking through the doors. It was cramped, packed.
I remember when we got our first TV, and I think we turned it on, and Roy Rogers was on. It was a huge deal. And then after that, I think we no longer practiced dancing. We no longer wanted to do anything but sit there and watch that TV when we got home.
I guess my happiest thought was the fact that I got a 4-year scholarship. I call it a scholarship. I was registering for English at UT, and this big old guy came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, boy, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm registering for English." He said, "Are you on a scholarship?" He was about 6'4". He said, "I'm a pulling guard from Abilene. I've got a scholarship." I said, "Well, I've got a scholarship. It's called Humble Oil Company." I worked 4 years in the Roustabout gang and paid my way through school pretty well.
A lot of people did that. Well, the Humble and Exxon have all been good to my family. I have a son-in-law who is just retired from Exxon, and he's been all over the world. And I now have a granddaughter that is an engineer for Exxon, and she's in Africa currently and has spent time in Korea before that. So we still have family. It's gone on. It's been good. given us a lot of meals along the way. 3 generations.
What y'all's dads do for Rumble? That,
My dad was in the gang, and then he was a gang pusher.
I worked one summer under him, and he was a super guy.
And I think when they worked for Humble at that time, if you bought a stock, they matched it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about your scholarship.
Mhm.
That's how Barbara, my sister and I went to college with
Yeah.
that stock,
Mhm.
that matching stock.
Mhm.
I'll never forget when my dad retired, along with several other men. It was in 1956, I believe, and he had been with Alma for 37 years. And when he gave his little brief talk, he said, "You know, I love all you guys, but he said I sure don't love this new company." He said they're kind of, I won't say the word, they weren't very nice to us. Not like the old Alma Log Camp or company. Exxon, it was Esso then, and of course it became Exxon. But you know, when you bring a bunch of Yankees down to Texas and let them take over the reins, it changes a whole lot of things.
You know, I was under the impression that we paid $10 a month rent. Sorry. And the utilities were basically taken care of. The water was taken care of. They mowed our lawns. You know, it was pretty easy living once the men got home because they didn't have a lot of responsibilities. It was a nice a setup for the families, for all of us.
Right.
It's a little bit of socialism, but you know, it kind of worked at the time.
One of the neat things, and this has nothing to do with Alma Camp, but one of the ladies mentioned the room in here that dedicates the Conroe baseball Wildcats.
Mhm.
As a kid, I remember working there, probably 7 or 8, 10 years old, selling popcorn and peanuts. But sometimes I'd take a break and go outside the ballpark. If you caught a ball and took it back, they'd give you a nickel for the ball. So made a few bucks that way.
Wow.
Well, we were also talking about the fact that nobody ever locked their doors. You know, everybody had an attic fan, and so all your windows had to be open. The doors were, you know, and it's like Fred said, you just went in and out of each other's houses. You never even thought about it.
One
But if
thing
you
we,
did something wrong, it would be known all over the camp within maybe 10 minutes. You know, I mean, that's the kind of information that was passed.
We always said if you
So
got in
close.
trouble at the front,
Right.
because I lived in the back of the camp, it was there before me.
There when you got there. So there was some accountability.
I think it was probably 47 or 8, they put in telephones in the houses, and they were on party lines. And I won't call the lady's name, but she talked more than anybody in the world. And my dad would get irritated. She'd pick the phone up to use it. Every time he'd pick it up, she'd be on there. Finally, he'd just slam it down where she could hear it. I think she got the message.
We'd have rings, like you'd have 2 rings for me, 3 rings for my neighbor, 1 ring for another neighbor. So if it just rings once and then it rings once again, then you pick up. But if you picked up, you could listen to a lot of other conversations if you were so interested.
And one of the unique things, I think, was the post office box.
Mm-hmm.
Pam lived right across the street from the post office, which was a little building, not even as large as this room,
Wasn't it round?
round, kind of octagonal, and it was everyone in the camp's box. And it was easy to just walk in there and see
Open.
what kind of letter Pam got or what kind of letter, read everybody else's mail.
We were also talking about, of course, as kids, we traveled by bicycle. And right across the street from the camp, there were 2 little stores. It was Kraft, or
And Brown.
Graft.
Graft.
Louise Graft.
Louise Graft, and
Joe Brown.
Joe Brown. And then if you could come up with, started out like pennies or nickels, but we always had to clear before we crossed the road. And if, so it'd be sometimes when your mother would let us go and we'd get there and Miss Graft would call and say, Debbie, your mama needs you to bring. We had a relay system that way.
We got a lot of cars fixed at Joe Brown's. He had a
Yes.
garage and a service station.
Their brother named Juicy Brown.
Juicy.
Juicy was about 6 foot tall and weighed about 390, I think. One day, my
Yeah.
brother and some other boys and Juicy got into what they call a flower fight. And what it was, they took some Durham tobacco bags and put flour in them and started throwing them at each other. Juicy started sweating. It looked like a big donut. I mean, it's beat anything you ever seen.
I lived on the back row, and I don't know,
Kaiser,
Kaisers lived on one side, the Reisingers lived on one side of me,
Billy
the
Lambs.
Abbotts, you remember Greg Abbott? His family lived across the street from me. Charles Tullis lived right down from me. I don't know if you remember Jim Wells. He worked for Humble, but I mean, I remember the people on Charlotte Tompkins. They were all, I remember my neighbors.
Barbara Steen helped us put all of this information together. I'm sorry she's not here today, but she had some great stories. But one of the stories that she told me that really touched my heart was about coming to my house on Saturday because she knew my mother made cakes. Mother made the cake every Saturday, so she said, "I just figured out a way to get you to come into your house to do something." And I'd always come in there and I'd say, "Good morning, Miss Carter." And Mother would say, "Well, hi, Barbara. I'm making a cake. Would you like a piece?" "Well, I love a piece of cake, Miss Carter." I love that story. I don't remember that, but yeah, it's a sweet story. So you went to neighbors' houses. You didn't think about anything about walking into a house and saying hello or "Can I come in?" or "What's up?"
And because we didn't have air conditioning and stuff, people were outside all the time. I mean, it was no big deal to go down and everybody's sitting on the porch and visiting. So it was a good way to grow up.
Play games.
And it
Lots
was
of games.
sad when everybody started moving out of the camp.
It was. You lost an awful lot of a community, very much of a community, strong community, with that many people. The Humble was the largest camp. This Humble Oil Camp was the largest one. So there were a lot of other people that came in and out. And it was a good place to grow up.
Not everyone moved at once, because I remember coming back. I was in college my freshman year, and there were still folks there. And then I think it was around Christmas time that year that we moved, my family did, to Conroe, moved into town. But I do remember other people still being there. I don't know when y'all moved.
I think they let you find a place
Yeah.
and make it convenient for you.
I guess we were a little different because we bought our house and moved it. It's still sitting on Silverdale. It's still there.
I think they sold the houses. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure for
You
how
could buy
much.
your house
Yeah, you could
for
buy
a
the
very
house and move
nominal
it.
amount.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, Billy Thomas talks about her dad bought one of the houses, and she lived in it for quite a while. Billy was in another camp. My dad went to work in the early 20s as a roustabout at that time, and they moved to Louisiana, and Humble provided them with a tent. So they lived in a tent for a number of years before they came to the old camp near where Jefferson is now. And so they thought they were really moving up to move into a house, instead of a tent. So I guess you would say Humble was providing housing for people for a long time.
Right.
Well, see, I was born in El Campo, but my dad was working for Humble at that time, and we lived in a camp in Vanderbilt. And it's just a little bitty town. Nobody's ever heard of Vanderbilt. We were in an oil field camp there, and those are early memories I have, where you have it of the first camp. And then we moved. My dad is originally from here, and then he got transferred here.
There was a man named Holcutt
Tom Poca.
Yeah.
that raised hogs, pigs,
Uh-huh.
and when you knew when it was getting cold, turning winter, because they would always butcher a hog. I remember going over there and watching, and it was sad. After they would butcher the hog, they'd lay this may not be too pretty to tell, but they'd lay them in a big vat of hot water to scald the hair off of it. Then they'd process it, and everybody in the camp that wanted a piece of pork got it. Chitlins and whatever else they had. You know.
I remember when I was little, that was the big deal, and you know that occasionally Dad would come in and say, "Oh, they're burning off a flare," and you know, and so we would all load up and go watch the fire. And Marie's laughing; she would watch the flares too.
Speaking of flares, you remember the what's the ponds called? Crater Lake.
Oh yeah.
Crater Lake was a place where a oil well blew out and then sunk, and they never did find the bottom of the big one. I think they have since then, but at one point they never found the bottom.
It's out on Porter Road, right?
No,
beyond
it's
the
on the
camp?
New Caney.
New
Caney Road.
You know, I remember being in high school, and that was always the big deal. Is if you would brave enough to get in, we were all afraid we'd die, or the monster would come up and get us. We also had, you remember, the sewage system.
Oh my gosh,
A
yes.
great big, huge, was it brick? I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then it had
Turned
rocks and stuff on it,
around.
and it had a pipe that went around, and that was the big deal. Mother and Daddy would threaten our lives, of course, so that immediately became the attraction.
Yeah, right.
You know, to go ride
I
around.
had no idea what it was.
No, and I don't know what if you fell off. or
Thought it was a
whatever
toy.
happened.
I don't know. Behind there, you could go crawfishing.
Yes.
I'm talking about crawfishing. Bill Fraser and I were going crawfishing one day, and I had a string that we'd use and put a piece of bacon or meat on it and stick a nail through it to sink it. Had an old dog that was really a good dog. I was standing walking on, going to the pond and swinging this thing around. All of a sudden, I felt something jerk. That dog had grabbed that thing and swallowed it. I pulled it.
no.
Bill said, "Don't pull that out." I said, "Well, I got to get it out. I got to fish." So I finally got it out.
And did the dog live?
The dog lived.
Poor dog.
Well, there are 9 in the family. Well,
Y'all lived in a
9
two-bedroom
children.
house?
Well, there were never more than 7 of us. Let's see, 6 of us in the house at any one time.
Okay.
Yeah, the older ones.
So every
don't-
time somebody would move out, somebody
Got a
else would be
bedroom.
born.
part of the bed. Yeah, there were a lot of us, but they all graduated from Conroe High School, and
He had a sister named Ivana that was really pretty, black-headed, dark-headed.
And your brothers and sisters? Well, my oldest brother is Terry Carter, and next was Dorothy Carter, and then Jane Carter, Jimmy Ray Carter, Divina Carter, and Marianne Carter, and then me, and then 2 brothers that died very young.
And Terry, the oldest one, graduated with Zanette.
That's right. He graduated with Anne Marie's father.
35.
Yeah. Yeah. They were classmates. That was fun. We got them together a couple of years ago before they both passed, and that was fun.
Fred, I think you said I never dreamed I'd find anybody that lived in that original old camp. But you said you got an older brother that's 86.
I do, yeah. My older brother was born when my parents moved here in 31. And like I say, the camp was built, they lived in town for the time being and then moved to the camp when it was built in the mid-30s. The school that some of you probably remember that blew up as a gas leak in New London,
That's
had he
it.
been there, he would have been in that school.
Oh, wow, really?
Fortunately, they moved to Conroe, yeah.